Thank you, Logan. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to our online church service on this snowed-in Sunday morning. Our service is hosted by the First Parish Northborough Tech Team, and I'm Reverend Lynda Sutherland from Northborough, and it is such a joy this morning to be leading this collaborative worship service with my dear friends and colleagues, Reverend Alice and Reverend Laurel.
I'm the Reverend Alice Anacheka-Nasemann, and I serve the Unitarian Church of Marlborough and Hudson. We are delighted to be sharing our service this morning with several congregations. We invite you to put your congregation's initials in your name so that we can see who is with us.
And I am Reverend Laurel Gray from the UU congregation in Westborough, Massachusetts. And I want to add that we're joined this morning by the congregation in Mendon Uxbridge. Their minister's out sick, so we have quite the team and gathered body this morning. So welcome.
And now I invite you to take a deep breath and settle into this moment and make space for us to be right here, right now. Our call to worship this morning is Forged in the Fire of Our Coming Together by Gretchen Haley. What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? In these days, we find ourselves too often stuck with these questions on repeat. What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? We grasp at signs and markers, articles of news and analysis, Facebook memes, and forwarded emails, as if the new zodiac, capable of forecasting all that life may yet bring our way, as if we could prepare, as if this life had ever made any promises of making sense or turning out the way we thought, as if we are not also actors in this still unfolding story. For this hour, we gather to surrender to the mystery, to release ourselves from the needing to know, the yearning to have it already figured out, and also the burden of believing we either have all the control or none. Here in our song and our silence, our stories and our sharing, we make space for a new breath, a new healing, a new possibility to take root. That is courage, forged in the fire of our coming together and felt in the spirit that comes alive in this act of faith, that we believe still a new world is possible, that we are creating it already here and now. Come, let us worship together. Our chalice lighting words are by student minister Melissa Jeter. As Alice lights our chalice this morning, if you have a chalice at home you'd like to light along with us, you are invited.
We light this chalice today to illuminate our way toward love. Inside the womb of this waiting time, we are bathed in sounds, floating in love, growing out of our comfort zone. We experience love, sorrow, pain, and joy. There is a numinous quickening as we await a new world yet unborn. And now please join me in the words of affirmation and covenant that we use each week in Westboro, as does Marlboro-Hudson. And Pam will put them up on the screen. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with the divine. This is our great covenant, one with another. Our opening hymn today is number 1017. You are invited to sing along with your microphone on mute as Olga plays and sings Building a New Way.
We are building a new way.
Our story for all ages this morning is The Fisherman and the Businessman, a Brazilian story by Paulo Coelho. I'm not going to pronounce his last name correctly. I apologize. Coelho. There was once a businessman sitting by the beach in a small Brazilian village. As he sat, he saw a Brazilian fisherman rowing a small boat towards the shore, having caught quite a few big fish. The businessman was impressed and asked the fisherman, "How long does it take you to catch so many fish?" The fisherman replied, "Oh, just a short while." "Then why don't you stay longer at sea and catch even more?" The businessman was astonished. "This is enough to feed my whole family," the fisherman said. The businessman then asked, "So what do you do for the rest of the day?" The fisherman replied, "Well, I usually wake up early in the morning, go out to sea and catch a few fish. Then I go back and play with my kids. In the afternoon, I take a nap with my wife, and when evening comes, I join my buddies in the village for a drink. We play guitar, sing, and dance throughout the night. The businessman offered a suggestion to the fisherman. I am a PhD in business management, he said. I could help you to become a more successful person. From now on, you should spend more time at sea and try to catch as many fish as possible. When you have saved enough money, you could buy a bigger boat and catch even more fish. Soon you'll be able to afford more boats, set up your own company, your own production plant for canned food, and a distribution network. By then, you will have moved out of this village and to Sao Paulo, where you can set up a headquarters to manage your other branches. The fisherman continued, well, what's after that? The businessman laughed heartily. After that, you can live like a king in your own house, and when the time is right, you can go public and float your shares in the stock exchange, and you will be rich. The fisherman asked, and after that? The businessman said, after that, you can finally retire. You can move to a house by the fishing village, wake up early in the morning, catch a few fish, and then return home to play with your kids. Have an afternoon nap with your wife, and when evening comes, you can join your buddies for a drink, play the guitar, and sing and dance throughout the night. The fisherman was puzzled. Isn't that what I'm doing now? Thank you.
And now we invite you into a time of reflection and contemplation as we leave space for an offering to your own congregation as you usually give. Please give generously as you are able to support our individual and collective UU ministries and work in the world. Donation information is in the chat. As we hear this, yes, okay.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. And no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will be as one.
If it's accessible to you, you want to settle a little more deeply into your body this morning. Maybe resting your feet on the ground helps you feel more grounded. Maybe you want to curl your feet up underneath you. Maybe you want to hold hands with the person next to you or a furry creature who's coming in to snuggle. See if you can feel the breath in your chest and maybe close your eyes if you'd like to. We'll share some silence after this prayer by Judith Hill. Wage peace with your breath. Breathe in firemen and rubble. Breathe out whole buildings and flocks of red wing blackbirds. Breathe out sleeping children and freshly mown fields. Breathe in confusion and breathe out maple trees. Breathe in the fallen and breathe out lifelong friendships intact. Wage peace with your listening. Hearing sirens pray loud. Remember your tools. Flower seeds, clothespins, clean rivers. Make soup, play music, memorize the words for thank you in 3 languages. Amen and blessed be.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive in this great turning. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive in this great turning. We shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love.
I have to admit that before COVID, I really hadn't thought much about the historical impact of pandemics or plagues. But of course, here we are, 2 years we've seen firsthand the rapid social change that has been generated as we're all adapting our personal and our professional lives in response to the pandemic. It turns out that disease has actually played a fairly substantial role in shaping history. For example, many scholars believe that back in the middle of the 1300s, the bubonic plague was responsible for ending the feudal system in England. In the most deadly plague and epidemic to date, 1/3 of the population of Europe was killed. The disease did not discriminate between nobles and peasants, but with more crowded living conditions, serfs were, of course, hit hardest by the disease. In the aftermath of the plague, there simply weren't enough people to work the land and to sustain the feudal system as it existed. Entire villages disappeared. Serfs began to demand and also to receive better working conditions and pay. Some scholars believe that the bubonic plague also weakened the hold that Catholicism held over society. Clergy died in large numbers along with everyone else. And the new recruited priests didn't hold the same level of education as their predecessors. Moreover, seeing that the priests had died along with everyone else, that they weren't immune to the disease, made the lay people question their superiority in God's eyes. One Catholic cardinal in the 1900s made the controversial argument that the mass mortality of priests during the plague ultimately paved the way for the Protestant Reformation. Moving forward in time, in this hemisphere, the mosquito has been a pretty active agent of revolution. In the summer of 1781 in Yorktown, Virginia, for example, 51% of the British troops were so sick with malaria that they couldn't stand up, more than half of the troops. When expected reinforcements never appeared later during the siege of Yorktown, General Cornwallis surrendered. And that surrender marked the end, essentially, of the American Revolution. The mosquito also played a role in supporting Haitian revolutionaries. Yellow fever ravaged the French army. And as one global event impacts others in kind of a massive game of global political dominoes, the Haitian victory ultimately became a factor in Napoleon's decision and agreement to sign the Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the size of the United States, this swath of land that stretched all the way from Louisiana up into Montana and even into parts of Saskatchewan and Alberta in Canada. In slightly more recent history, the 1918 flu epidemic, which we've heard referenced so often in the past few years, led ultimately to socialized medicine, first in Russia and then in several other countries. And also, as a result of that epidemic, many people were very disillusioned with the medical system. Does that sound at all familiar? And so the flu pandemic sparked new interest in alternative medicines that took off in the United States in the 1920s and then spread out to other countries as well. Bringing things back to today. For the past year, we've been hearing about the Great Resignation, folks leaving their jobs in record numbers as a result of COVID. This morning, we're shifting the language a little bit. Instead of the Great Resignation, we're talking about the Great Transformation. I wonder, in 100 years, or 500, or even 1,000 years, what major cultural and societal changes will historians point to as originating in this time?
Thank you, Olga. I remember starting to hear about the Great Resignation sometime in the time warp that is pandemic life, and not really understanding what it meant. It has the ring of doom and dust bowls of things falling apart. And perhaps there's some truth in that, as the examples that Alice gave. But I think we need to be specific about what is falling apart, about who or what is feeling the pressure. This is the best explanation I have found and helped me to understand this paradigm shift that's occurring. Kurt Eichenwald wrote this in a series of tweets in November 1st of 2021. He's a journalist and author who's widely published and has written for the New York Times since 1986. This is a portion of what he wrote in this series of tweets, and I want to encourage that we look for the ways that power is being renegotiated here. He says this: "The Great Resignation is not about people not wanting to work. It is about a dawning recognition that for a larger and larger portion of this country, the American dream is dead, and with it, the inspiration of working toward a better future for oneself. Instead, work becomes not the means towards reaching an aspiration, a spouse, children, a home, vacations, personal growth, a retirement. Instead, the greed culture has turned work for millions into just a means of survival, with wages stagnant, healthcare unaffordable, insurance treated as a luxury, paid free time an impossibility, children unaffordable, home's a dream. Yes, work is important, but not without the promise of a future. Many young people see nothing but 40 years of the same, further enriching the obscenely rich. The system has taught people how to survive without, because they don't believe they will ever have. If they reasonably don't believe they will ever be able to afford a house or to raise children, and will never have group insurance or a paid vacation, and can make it living with their parents, and have already been taught by McDonald's and Walmart how to apply for food stamps and Medicaid, because those multi-billion-dollar corporations know they don't pay enough for their employees to survive, and are already getting those benefits, and have the choice of just saying, forget it, I'm going to work on my painting or sewing or whatever. I am tired of being abused by my supervisor. I am tired of being screamed at by customers for things out of my control. I am tired of watching adults throw temper tantrums and then being called out by my company because I could have handled it better. I can survive without all of this. I can be happier without all of this. I am paid so little, my life won't be that different. That is why we have the Great Resignation," he wrote. And as NPR pointed out in an article just this week, this phenomenon extends far beyond low-wage jobs and encompasses a whopping 33 million Americans who have quit their jobs in the last year. Across the board, people are leaving jobs in the hopes of finding better pay, a better work-life balance, or a restart from a job that had become untenable. It's not that people don't want to work. It's that the old way is no longer tolerable. I wonder how you have felt this paradigm in your own lives, or seen it in the younger people in your lives. I, for one, can say that this rings very true to me, not the desire to resign, but the systemic problems that are being exposed. Just this week, I attended a webinar that the Unitarian Universalist Association had advertised about public service loan forgiveness. It is a government program created in 2007 to help address the reality that people going into public service professions like teaching, working for nonprofits, and the like, were required to obtain levels of education that they would not be able to pay off with their work income. It's an impossible setup. Go into debt to be eligible for work that doesn't pay enough to cover the debt. And it wasn't until August of 2020 that the government changed their rules and made people working for religious institutions eligible for student loan forgiveness. The Great Resignation is not some futuristic scene with empty offices and great laziness. It's a culture shift, an act of non-compliance, a refusal to cooperate with an economic system that is built on unjust labor practices and extraordinary greed. See, I, for one, can't square the fact that the interest rate on my car loan is half the interest rate on my federal student loans. The loans that I had to take out to pay for the education, to be eligible for the job that makes me able to pay the loans. That's not laziness or mismanagement or too much avocado toast. It's a setup. It's a system that squeezes the vulnerable and rewards the greedy. So read this way, the Great Resignation is not about doom or despair. It's about empowerment. It's about knowing that a system of extraction does not work and is not the only way. It's about choosing to live by a different set of ideals, because the ideals that capitalism has been selling have proven themselves to be false idols. Doesn't that sound hopeful? Maybe not for massive extractive corporations, but certainly for people, for community, for owning our capacity to build a different world centered on a different set of values. For this, we pray. Amen.
When I joined the First Universalist Church in Denver, Colorado in 2007, I was thrilled to learn they had a bookstore. The first book I picked up spoke straight to what my soul was hungering for. It said, in this stirring book, world-renowned environmentalist Paul Hawken tells the story of what's going right in this world. Blessed Unrest is the account of how people, from students in Australia to farmers in France, from shoemakers to zoologists and poets, use imagination, conviction, and resilience to redefine our relationship to the environment and to one another, healing the wounds of the earth with passion and determination. Wow, that was really food for my soul at the time. And it started me on a journey. At the beginning of my UU journey, books like Blessed Unrest have been my companions. Bill McKibben said about that book, the movers and shakers on our planet aren't the millionaires and the generals. They're the incredible numbers of people around the world filled with love for neighbor and for the earth, who are resisting, remaking, restoring, renewing, revitalizing. Hawken talks about the ingenuity of organizers, engineers, designers, social entrepreneurs, and individuals that has created a powerful arsenal of alternatives to extractive and exploitative structures and practices. He says the financial and technical means are in place to address and restore the needs of the biosphere, and society. Poverty, hunger, and preventable childhood diseases can be eliminated in a single generation. Energy use can be reduced. Living wage jobs can be created for every man and woman who wants one. The toxins and poisons that permeate our daily lives can be completely eliminated through green chemistry. Green, safe, livable cities are at the fingertips of architects and designers. What, he asks, is stopping us from accomplishing these tasks? His answer is, it has been said that we cannot save our planet unless humankind undergoes a widespread spiritual and religious awakening. In other words, fixes won't fix unless we fix our souls as well. So let's ask ourselves this question. Would we recognize a worldwide spiritual awakening if we saw one? Or to put it another way, what if there is already in place a large-scale spiritual awakening and we are simply not recognizing it? A few years ago, just after I graduated from seminary, Sharon Welch, one of my favorite female theologians, recruited me to help with a book after the protests are heard. Her question for this book was this: once you've decided not to cooperate with an economic system that is built on unjust labor practices and extraordinary greed, as Laurel put it, what do you do? How do we make any difference at all when big institutions and systems, even well-meaning ones, continue to wreak so much damage? One sure Hawkins alludes to in his book is through smallness, grace, and locality. Individuals start where they are and make the road by walking. Now, Sharon had been a follower of Paul Hawkins as well for some years, and she was beginning to discover some of these people that were making this new road by walking. Have you heard of social entrepreneurship? She said. Yes, as a matter of fact, in my women's studies major, when I was getting my bachelor's degree in 2010, I found out about social entrepreneurship. This was one of the things that's highlighted in this book, and I was recruited to actually interview people who were doing things differently and to write down their experiences as examples of what Sharon was talking about in her book. This was my first intimate glimpse of what I've come to call in my own mind, the Great Turning. In her chapter, Go Social and Go Green, Sharon explains how social entrepreneurs take action and seek to go beyond just doing things better, minimizing our damage a little bit, and actually transform into stable new systems that are fundamentally different. One of the interviews I did for this book was with the leaders and founders of the Oneota Co-op. It's a food cooperative in the small town of Decorah, Iowa, where I finished my bachelor's degree and where I lived when I started seminary. This co-op was started in the 1970s, not as a co-op, but as a buying club. Some young people, idealistic, age of Aquarius hippies got together and said, you know, we want to eat and encourage farmers to produce organic and sustainably and humanely raised food. That's what we want to eat, and we want to be able to live into our values. And we want to be able to afford this food. And so they got together and started to figure out ways to source the food. They didn't know they were going to start a nonprofit, but they ended up figuring out that a co-op structure was the best form of business for what they were trying to do. And that co-op, over the last 30, 40, 50 years now, has grown into a community institution, has sparked the local college to go 30% locally sourced food for the whole college, which is pretty hard in northern Iowa. That's an accomplishment. Has sparked large grocery chains to have big organic sections before Walmart started doing that. I learned about that story and their dreams for a healthier and more equitable future for everyone. I learned about how they began to realize that as they moved from volunteer help in their little shed as it started out into an actual store where community members could come and shop. They needed to employ people, and they decided no one in this organization is going to make more than 25 times our very lowest starting pay. And they have stuck to that ever since. If you know anything about corporate pay rates, you'll know that's quite an accomplishment as well. People have been doing this for years. And I think that since COVID began, we have been seeing it highlighted more. And I think in this day and age of social media, the word gets around faster. COVID has served to highlight some of the ways in which our current systems of extraction and exploitation don't work, and maybe has made more people willing to believe this is not the only way to do things. And since I began to notice that these things were happening, I have seen evidence of it everywhere. I'm going to let you know some of my sources of hope. The book, The Impossible, may take a little while. Yes Magazine, and the newest Netflix movie that I just discovered, Bending the Arc, which is the story of Paul Farmer and the Doctors Beyond Borders and much more. How that has, just please watch it. Bending the Arc. And all of these links will be put into your church emails this coming week, so that if you're interested, you can look at them. And this most recent thing, the Great Resignation, yet more evidence that the great reimagining that has been happening for years is becoming more visible all the time. Maybe we really are in a great turning, a shift in values that's creating a new form of community and a new form of story. People all over the world are asking questions such as, what happens when a democracy is not ruled by a dominant minority? What would a world feel like that created solutions to our problems from the ground up? What if we are entering a transitional phase of human development where what works is invisible because the solution is not one big program, not a set of laws, not a centralized plan at all, but rather a vast network of everyday people just living their values? What if we, you and me and millions of others across the world, are the great turning? Our everyday acts matter more than we know. We're building a new way. We're turning this world around. May we dare to live from the center of our being. May the fire that burns in our belly light our way. And may our collected intention make this world shine anew.
We come from the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We come from the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. Oh, so is life. Ah, so is life. Oh, so is life. Ah, so is life. Water makes the river, river wash the mountain. Fire makes the sunlight turn the world around. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain, spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around. We are of the spirit, truly of the spirit, only can the spirit turn the world around. Oh, so is life a batiwa, so is life. Oh, so is life a batiwa, so is life. Oh, so is life a batiwa, so is life. Oh, so is life a batiwa, so is life.